Welcome, Thomas Moore. It's wonderful to see you again, and thanks for joining us in the Seekers Forum.
It's always good to be with you, Mark.
Thank you. I'd like to begin by talking about your amazing new book. It's called The Eloquence of Silence, Surprising Wisdom in Tales of Emptiness. And I was really taken aback by the topic and wondered, what is it that made you want to write a book about kenosis, negative capability, emptiness? What drew you to this subject?
Well, I've been living with these ideas, even these quotes, these stories that I quoted in passages. I've been living with them for many, many years, and they've been very important to me in my work. So I don't know what to say. It's the idea of emptiness to me is essential. It's essential to be able to not to be overly attached to your own agendas, and to be open in your mind to new thoughts when you hear them, and new experiences. All that's emptiness. There's so many aspects of it. It's a very rich part of both the life of the soul and the spirit, I would say, both psychologically and spiritually. Very important.
So let's start with the psychological. Why is emptiness important to our psychological health, wholeness, balance?
To be empty, it really means, I think we better say something about what that means. To me, it means not to be overly engaged with some theory or agenda or person or language, not to be overly attached to any of that, and therefore to be able to step back and calmly and in a relaxed way deal with these big issues that we always talk about. I think that we're too serious sometimes. I think there's some humor. A lot of the stories I have in this book are at least slightly humorous. And I think that's important, because to have a sense of humor about what you're doing means you have some detachment. You're not clinging to it. And so emptiness merely means not clinging.
Mm-hmm. Right. You talk about emptiness and fullness being close to one another on either side of the boat, so to speak.
Yes.
Can you say something about the relationship between vitality and emptiness?
I like that image that was part of that discussion, the image from the Gospels where Jesus talks to these people who are fishermen in a boat, and they're not catching anything on one side, and the other side they get all kinds of fish. I love that image for being so close to what is empty and what is full. It's I think the images are so important. So I think that what happens is that if you can have a certain distance in your attitude toward your ideas and toward what you are allied to in your life, then that allows you to have more in your life. Actually, you are open to more. So let's say, for example, someone is very convinced that that to be an agnostic, not to be attached to any religion, is really important. And okay, that can be a very good place to be. I'm there a good part of the time. But on the other hand, if you are so attached to it that you can't be open at all to something else, then if some very rich thought comes from one of the traditions, you're not open to it because it looks traditional, or it looks like part of a belief system. You may not be open to it because your own attachment is so tight. And the trouble with that particular kind, the example I gave, is that a person may feel very open-minded. Mm-hmm. They may feel that it's very hard to be empty, because you may think you are, but that when you think you are, that's probably the worst place. because being unattached and not being so given to everything that's important to you that requires stepping back and being able to consider a lot of things that maybe would normally be not part of your way of doing things.
Mhm. So emptiness and openness are
Yeah, very
almost
close.
synonymous.
Yeah, I think they're very close. I don't know if they're not exactly the same, but they're very close.
Mm.
Because empty means a lot of many other things as well. So, for example, emptiness. Well, I'll give you the example from the book. I have a quote from the Tao Te Ching about how a house should have windows and doors, and a room should have windows, and the house should have doors. And I think that's a very good image, wonderful image. I've thought about that for years, that the self has to have windows and doors. You have to be able to have a flow from the world there, and this self, this sense of I, it's got to be open. There have to be windows and doors. Otherwise, it's like an actual house or an actual room. If you don't have any windows, it's all closed in and dark, and there's no air. I mean, it's so that kind of emptiness then means be able to have things come and go. So you're in movement. There's a movement going on, a natural movement, and it's not static. You are not static. So that's another aspect of emptiness, is about movement. And moving is very important, I think. Very important to be able to move ahead and not be ever stuck in the same place.
Mm. And that's the connection between emptiness and vitality.
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah, to be alive means that you're able to, you're alive, you can move around.
Mhm. You talk a lot in the book about naturalness and how emptiness helps us to be natural. You say, don't let bothersome, selfish motives get in the way, or fears or anxieties, and manipulating self-conscious thoughts.
Yeah.
So what I hear is that when the mind is too active, too busy, there is no emptiness, there's no openness, and it interferes with naturalness.
I think so. I get that word from Shunryu Suzuki, from his book Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, where he has a chapter on naturalness, and he relates it to emptiness there. And I think that's a pretty good angle on emptiness. It's not the whole story, but it's a good way of looking at it. And I do think that normal conversations, I think we have them every day. I know I do, where you're talking to somebody and you get this feeling that they really need to convert you to their idea, or they have some problem with you and they can't really be straight with you or open with you. And I think that's the kind of thing I'm talking about here. The naturalness would be a kind of natural flow without all this static of many agendas going on that are fairly invisible, but you can detect them in the way the conversation goes. And I think it's very good to aim for that naturalness and to maybe notice when it's really about what psychologists call transference. You come into a conversation and you come with a lot of assumptions and a lot of narratives going on and dialogues going on inside you in a way, and they impact the conversation you're having. And I think the more you can let up on those things, notice where they are, and instead of having them influence your relationship so much, to be able to, I think you can just let them float a bit, float away, not be so interfering.
Mm-hmm. So attachment is antithetical to emptiness.
I think it is, yeah. Attachment and fears. There are a lot of fears, I think, when you talk to somebody. Am I going to be smart enough? Am I going to look bad? Will this person like me? All these things, thoughts that might be going on. And they are that when you have them and they're strong, you are not empty. And there's no naturalness in that conversation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'd like to ask you a little bit about loss and emptiness and liberation. You say that Hermes, the thief, steals from us for our benefit, and that to find the kingdom of heaven, it's necessary to lose things that are precious to you.
Yes.
Could you say more about that, please?
Yes, can I say something about Hermes first?
Please.
I do like to think mythologically. That's part of my interest in religious studies, I think. Mythology is part of most religions. And the Greeks had a wonderful collection of stories about the gods, but they really felt the gods being present, like powers in life that are present. And Hermes is one of the most unusual ones because he, as most people know, he had wings on his feet. He could really get around. He could go between the realm of the gods and the human realm pretty easily. And he guided souls when they died. When people died, he guided souls to the underworld. And he brought dreams. He's the one who put you to sleep and woke you up. But he was also a thief. And the great story of Hermes is that he stole his brother's cattle when he was only a day old. And so he does it with a great deal of deception and trickery. And I think it's so interesting to imagine there were temples to this god. You know, you go into a temple and you worship this god who was the thief. And I think what you do is you think deeply and carefully about how life itself, your life, the life that goes through you, takes things from you all the time. It's not just that somebody does it, but that life takes things from you. So you might lose your health. You know, one day you wake up and you've got a problem. You've lost your health. Who took it away? Hermes took it away. That's this thing about life. It takes things away from you. You are with somebody, you have a good friend or you have a partner that you're with, and one day they're not there. They go away for some reason. They just part. That happens in friendships, that happens in marriages and partnerships, and business partnerships as well. So you lose that. Life is taking from us all the time. And I think we could honor that. We could honor that and realize that in a certain way, then life itself empties us. You don't have to go about looking for it. If you just hang around long enough, you're going to be losing things. And that is a kind of emptying of who you are. And that, if you see that this is one of the gods that's doing this, then it's a way of saying that this is natural to life. This happens in life. And you might as well get used to it and deal with it somehow. That same God, the same principle in life that takes things away, however, brings things into your life too. The very same thing. It's a kind of coming and going. So I think that's I think it's a very sacred attitude toward life that you acknowledge and decide to live your life knowing that you're going to be stolen from and you're going to be given.
Mm-hmm. And that without the theft, there would be no replenishment.
Without the theft, there's nothing. I mean, without the theft, this whole process doesn't happen. And yet this is an aspect of being alive. So in other words, to feel vital, to really be alive, you have to be in this process of losing and being given.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, beautiful. And of course, that goes against everything that we're taught about holding on and accumulating and getting bigger, and that whatever diminishes us is the enemy in some way. This inverts that completely.
Yeah, it's so important. To me, whenever I teach, I talk mythology, I talk about Hermes, and I find that it's the one thing that might change a person's attitude toward life, and in a joyful way. It looks kind of weird at first. People say, "What? How can this be?" But when you really get into it, you realize there's a great deal of joy. And he was a figure who was funny and fun and comic. There was that side to him too. And there's that joy of life that comes from seeing the comedy that life is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, speaking of joy, I was just going to ask you why you say that we are in such desperate need of joy. You say that society has run out of wine in the story of turning water to wine. Can you say more about that, please?
Sure. It's a wonderful story. Just take it as a story, not moralistic and not about belief, but just a great story of Jesus there going to a wedding party. That's pretty good. You know, when you have your main spiritual figure appearing, that's one of the first stories that's told of him in the Gospel of John. It's the first one. So you find him, where is he? Is he there in a church trying to tell people how to live? No, he's at a wedding party making wine out of water. So he's a winemaker. That's who this great spiritual figure is. I think that's fantastic in itself. And from early on, like from the very early centuries of when that story was told, people saw a Greek god in that story, the god Dionysus, that there was something Dionysian about the way Jesus was presenting this way of life. And that the Dionysian is about being able to withstand both pain and joy, really intense pain and really great joy, really not just simple happiness, but real joy. So I think that story then is very important, and it gives us the image for it is wine. And whatever you think about alcohol, you got to just think about this as a great story, and that drinking wine does affect you. It can make you feel somewhat more relaxed. I'm not talking about drinking too much, just having some. Then what you're doing then, you're starting out from joy. And think about how many people have experienced the religions and spiritual movements in the world as the opposite of joy. Just the opposite. I think the great majority of people have experienced religion as not joyful. And so this is a very important story. And it's about the empty part of it is that at the beginning, they don't have any wine for this party, which is like saying the state we're in, we don't have the Dionysian with us. We are pretty, many of us are depressed, and the joy is missing. So that's the situation. And in that state, these big jars are there and they're empty. And they are used for purification waters to purify. So Jesus tells the waiters to put water into these jars, and then to taste it. And when they taste it, they find it's the best wine they've ever had. And so I think it's a beautiful image of what we could do is we could try to deal with this depression and meanness that is all around us, and take that story to heart and realize that let's take all that purifying energy we have in our lives and change it to wine, change it to a joy in life. And you can do that. You can have that intention in life, not to be so mean-spirited or so depressed, but instead, no matter what's going on, bring some joy to the world you live in.
So you associate purification with depression, or purification with an anti-joy impulse?
Yeah, I think you could say that, because the spiritual movements, I know all around the world, so many have been dedicated to purity. Purity of intention, purity of mind, sexual purity, so much of that. And so I think these days when you hear purity like that, I mean, I could give a talk on purity as a great thing, but I think that the way it works out is that, yeah, it's something needs to be replaced by something more joyful.
Beautiful. Much of the book and much of your teaching seems to be an argument against a mechanical view of the self, and learning, as you put it, that life is essentially and positively mysterious. And of course, mystery and emptiness are so closely aligned. Can you say something more about our discomfort with mystery and how that conspires against our awakening?
I think that there is in contemporary culture, I was going to say Western, but it's all over the world. Now, in our time especially, it's so important to understand everything. Like our relationship with nature is more of understanding than loving. It's more about trying to figure it all out and analyze everything. And with this idea, if only we understood everything about nature, we'd be in such better shape. I think that's totally false. It just doesn't work that way. There are other ways to be involved in the world besides understanding it. And so we could allow the mystery to be present. today there's a very strong attitude in people all over the place. I think they get it in the media a lot that it's a good thing to understand the world, and if you don't understand it, you're doomed. I don't think that's right. The alternative, and this is what we get from many of the religions, if not all of them, in the spiritual movements, is a mystery. So our job, I would define religion myself. I know a lot of today people don't do this, but I would define religion as ways of engaging the mysteries of life. That's what religion is, essentially, in my mind. There are ways, rituals, stories, songs, poetry, theologies, all these different ways to engage the mysteries without explaining them, but to engage them deeply, to really get into them and make them part of life. But you don't have to explain them. The example I often give is, it's like a painting. If you, let's say you go to an art gallery and see this painting you really love, and so you bring it home. You don't hire someone to come to your house and explain the painting to you. You hang it there for years so that you look at it day after day, year after year, and it keeps giving you something. And someone will say, well, what's it giving you? I don't know. It's a mystery. It's very mysterious why that's important, but I wouldn't part with it because it has made my life worth living.
Yeah. And the same in relationship, isn't it? When the person you're with ceases to be a mystery to you, and you're trying to control them or define them or understand them, right, you lose an element of the love. I think so. I think that I often say this when I'm teaching psychotherapists, that, you know, this idea of understanding a person and figuring them out is way, way overrated. Let's not try to just figure people out, but let's appreciate who they are and the fact that you'll never understand them fully. And my experience is that through my friends and my wife, that the older you get, the more years you spend together, the more mysterious they become. And they kind of grow into their mysteriousness. It's they don't become clearer. They grow into it and they begin acting even more mysteriously and oddly all the time. And I feel that about myself. I've often felt that, you know, as long as I have my eccentricity, I'm okay. But once I become standard, I'm really in trouble. Right. So what about the search for self-knowledge and the injunction to know thyself? I know. We're not engaging. This isn't about understanding ourselves so much as appreciating the mystery of who we are. Yes, I think you can know yourself in a way that is not an intellectual, rational analysis of yourself. It can be, you've lived with yourself for a long time. It's going back to that idea of the painting hanging on the wall. You've been around with yourself for quite a while. You've been hanging out with this self. And so you get to know it. There's a knowledge there, but it's not an analysis. It's like you can explain it. You can't. I hope you can't explain who you are, but you can say, well, I've noticed this is what I do. This is how I react. And it's changed over the years, and that's very interesting. And I see things that I'm really happy that have changed, and some things maybe not so happy. You can do all of that. That's self-knowledge, but it's not really you're not saying ego, superego, and id, you know. Right. Let's talk a little bit about emptiness and genius. You say that you have to be empty to allow genius to enter and shape you. Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit more about what you mean? Yes, sure. There are different ways of describing how we are led along in life. For example, if you're an artist or really anybody at all, you could be led by a muse. So the muse of an artist, what is that muse? It's not an aspect of the person, or it's not a part of a person. It's one of the things that's part of life when you are at all a creative person.
that you can be inspired. How do you get inspired? Where does it come from? Who knows? But you have the experience of being inspired by, and so you try to give it some sort of shape and source. You say the source of this inspiration is like a muse, or another word they use more technically, daimon. The Greeks use the word daimon, meaning that there's this powerful presence that you encounter either inwardly or outwardly, and it can guide you in your life. And I often tell stories from my own life where somebody talked to me and said something that I felt they were speaking for the daimon there, for the muse. They were guiding me, not intentionally, because I don't think they knew what they were doing, but their voice was the voice of the daimon or the angel. You can use the word angel if you like. I like angels myself quite a lot. So you can be guided, your life can be guided by this. And so I think when I talk about the genius, see, the Romans used the word genius. They didn't see it as an aspect of a person. Like we tend to think a person's genius means they're really smart or gifted. They didn't, the Romans thought of it differently, and they gave us this word genius. And what they meant by it was, again, like a presence, not literal presence, but still the feeling of presence that could inspire you and direct you. Mm-hmm. And they said frequently that, especially of the daimon, that that often the guidance is negative in the sense that it says, don't do this and don't do that. That's a very important form of guidance as well. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I think, and this is how I've lived, and I continue to live, and I really advocate it, that become attuned to these, all these words are really for the same kind of presence. Be attuned to what can guide you and inspire you and warn you, and get to know it and learn how to listen to it and discern it from other maybe fears, things like that. And you live a life that is guided then, rather than where you are making up. See, goes entirely against the existentialist idea that you create your own life. Mm-hmm. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about not creating your own life, but being guided by this kind of an invisible presence that can be with you your whole life, and you get to know it over the years, and you can trust that.
But in order to trust it, we have to be able to hear it, as you're saying. And you talk about quiet being a form of emptiness, and a lesson in how subtle life is, learning to listen with an inner ear to what is being said in the world. Can you say something about quiet and the need for quiet in this, in this
totally
world?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. How can you be guided if you can't hear it with all the noise going on? And it is like a voice. Yeah. I don't want to say it's a voice, like it's actual voice out there. I don't want to say that, but it's like a voice, this being guided. I remember, I'll give you an example. I was in a monastery when I was a young man, a Catholic monastery, for 13 years. And I woke up one morning and I just knew that it was over for me. Mm-hmm. I knew it completely. I had no doubt. Mm-hmm. But the night before, I was fully into this life I've been living for all this time. And I expected to be in it my whole life. But I woke up one morning, and I realized it's over. And that was like that daimonic presence telling me, time to move on. So I went to the head of the abbot of the community I was in, and I told him, I said, I think it's over for me, and I'm going to have to leave. And he said to me, why don't you stay a year and figure it out, make sure? I said, it's not going to take me a year to figure it out. I figured that out this morning. It's like, when you have this, when you're following this voice and you can hear it. See, I was in a place that was very quiet. The monastery was very quiet. Silence was an important part of that life. I think that helped me be able to listen to this and be so certain in my decision, and not have to take a year to figure it out, but just be ready, because the voice came and now I'm ready to go. That's the way I like it, be able to move quickly. Not a,
How did you know, Tom, that this was the daimon and not your fear or your resistance?
well,
Or
that's it. See, you've got to spend a lot of time. That's why we meditate. That's why we pray. That's why we study. We do all of that so that we can be prepared to know, to be able to discern those things when they happen. It takes a lot of preparation, and I think experience too. If you've made a number of decisions, see, my feeling is that almost every day I have an opportunity to listen to the daimon. This morning, maybe an hour ago, I left the house to go down to the store. And when I was leaving, I thought, there's something I forgot, forgot something there. Now, should I go back or not? That was a big moment there for me for today, because it was trying to determine whether the thing I felt was this daimon, even a very tiny thing, very small thing. And if you practice that every day, try to discern what is going on in very small things. I think then when the big ones come along, you're better prepared to know what to trust and what not to trust.
so you went back to the house for what the daimon.
I did, yeah.
Let's just say a little bit about hope, because that's something that's in short supply for a lot of folks. You say that hope is a power of soul that sustains you in the presence of mystery and despair. That's so lovely. So what do you mean by hope in this context?
I do not mean that I have expectations that things will turn out the way I want them to. That's not what I mean. That's something else. I see hope more as I mean, when I was in Catholicism, I learned a lot of good things when I was doing that life. And one of the things was faith, hope, and charity as great virtues, which means powers of soul. And so I still feel that hope is one of those things, that powers of soul, that you can, no matter how bad things are, you can have an openness to life. You don't know how it's going to turn out. It could turn out badly, but you have hope. In other words, you're able to move ahead because it's so close to trust and faith. They're almost identical. So that because you can trust in life, and that's the way you choose to live. So right now, I have terrible, terrible feelings, and I'm up late at night sometimes thinking about the state of the world. It's so dumb, things that are going on. So immature, this world we live in with its leadership. And but I have hope. If people ask me, I'll say I'm an optimist, and that's an expression of hope to me. So I don't know how it's going to turn out. It's not that I expect it to turn out fine. It may not turn out fine, but I am going to live in such a way that I want to continue this life that I think is so beautiful.
Mm-hmm. So hope is a willingness to be open to what has yet to be.
I think so. Yeah, I think it's like that. Yeah.
And so hope and emptiness go hand in hand.
They're very close to each other. They're very close to each other because real hope is there's nothing there. It's like, that's what I'm saying. It's not that you think or you trust, that you assume that things are going to turn out okay. You don't do that. That's naive, and that's immature. That's not it. But a mature hope it comes from not having to know. That's part of the emptiness in it. And the other is that it's not about how it's going to turn out. It's much less. It's much less solid. It's like, Emily Dickinson, hope is the thing with feathers. It's like it's something that flies and soars and flutters, maybe more like a butterfly or like a bird. That's its nature. It's not solid. It's not an end point. It's a starting point, but it's very, very empty because people will say, well, why do you hope? I can't say. That's just the way I want to live.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, beautiful. Just a couple more questions. I wanted to talk about emptiness and mortality. You have some wonderful passages in the book. First, you're talking about love. And you say that love feels timeless and is not just physical. It would have to be a cynical universe to shut down such intense love mid-course. And I can't live with that degree of cynicism. I thought that was great. So you're saying that you can't imagine that it's a final end, because what kind of universe would interrupt this flow of love?
Yes. Yes, that's to me, that's the best argument for the immortality of the person, is that love has all the hallmarks, all the feeling tone, all the substance of being eternal, not ending. I think that's pretty good evidence that there's at least in some way, some mysterious way, that we don't die and it doesn't just all end. I think that's a good basis for it. I mean, I have, I always, as soon as I say that, I have voices, I have these little voices coming in saying, oh, that's naive. And, my friend, James Hillman, surprised me one day about 2 years before he died. He told me, I mean, I knew at that point that he had this terminal cancer. He had nothing, there was nothing he could do about it. And so he said to me, we were planning his funeral, actually. He asked me to direct his funeral. And so we were talking about it. And he said to me, he said, about death, I'm a materialist. I thought it was so interesting, because I wouldn't say that, I wouldn't say that. I would never say that there's nothing after death. How do I know anyway? It's all empty. You see, it's empty in the sense that it's stupid. I think it doesn't make any sense to say that death is the end, because you don't know. Mm-hmm. Our primary position in life is ignorance. What I quote Nicholas of Cusa in this book, who was a great Christian theologian who talked about sacred ignorance. How important it was, sacred, to not know so many things about life. And one of them would be what happens after death. So I assume that the best position to be in is empty, that you don't know. And from there, you can talk if you want. It's got to be talk that is influenced by the emptiness at the core of it all. And I thought that Hillman didn't have the emptiness. And I was disappointed at that point, this very brilliant man. But the way he put it made me think, well, he's speaking like a European academic. He said, I'm a materialist. Well, that's what they say in the universities. I'm a materialist, or I'm an existentialist, or whatever. You identify with that role. I would never do that either. Yeah. I would not want to ever say that, because that is putting an end point on where you are. I'd rather have it open and therefore empty. Mm-hmm.
You'd rather have an ellipsis than a period.
Absolutely. Always.
Yes.
Always.
Yes.
No periods.
Right. You write that we end these gossamer lives incomplete in a way, turning over the precious matters we toiled at to those coming after us, which to me is another beautiful way of talking about continuity.
Yes.
So mortality isn't something that you grieve?
Oh, I don't know if I go that far. I do grieve. I'd like to go on forever. Sure. I don't want this to end. Okay. So that has to be part of it. If you can't grieve it, then you aren't really, there's not much at stake. There has to be a lot at stake. And so I think you have to grieve it. At least I do. However, that doesn't mean that I have to cling to it, that I can at the same time say, well, however this works, it's been pretty good. I think of death and birth as very close to each other. So I just came into this world not knowing what it was all about. And it's been very good for me. I know it's tough for a lot of people, but it's been very good for me. And I've had my problems, but it's basically been very good. So I am perfectly okay about leaving it because I figure it's probably similar to coming into this thing. And it makes sense that it would be. Alpha and Omega, they say, the Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. And the alchemists used to say, my end is my beginning. And that was a way of, I think, getting at that same mystery. It's a mystery. What does that mean? My end is my beginning. You can't make that. That's not a logical statement, really. You have to just say it and then be caught up in the mystery of it. And to me, the mystery of all of that, the emptiness in it, allows me to be accepting and to go on.
Beautiful. Thank you very much. This was such a beautiful conversation, and it's a wonderful, wonderful book.
Thank
So
you.
I want to recommend that everyone go out and get The Eloquence of Silence. It's another gorgeous work by Thomas More. And as always, Tom, it's beautiful to talk to you.
And for me as well. And I thank you. I can't thank you enough for having me with you today.
My pleasure. Take good care.
Okay, you too. Bye.
Bye-bye.